In this episode, we visited Enchanted Tamarind Grove, which some people say was planted a millennium ago. Tamarind trees live for around 200 to 300 years. So why do these trees exhibit this startling longevity? Not just one tree, but hundreds have stood here for a millennium. In their struggle to stay alive, every tree has sprouted a survival mechanism of unusual regenerative properties. Rarely, if never, you will see tamarind trees command its roots to sprout into new trees, which in turn sprout newer trees from their own extended roots, like grass runners. But this is not a class in botany. It is to introduce the viewer to mythical aspects of this enchanted grove, which the local villagers claim has incredible regenerative and healing powers. You'll have to see and feel it for yourself to believe it. Since time immemorial, people have felt a strong connection to trees. Trees have played a role in mythology, religion, and law since the earliest human civilizations. Every culture has stories about trees possessing mystic powers. Forests are often setting for stories of adventure, and trees can take on roles of deities depending on the narrative. So here we are in the middle of the coronavirus lockdown. But we're not locked in. We're in a magical, enchanted grove of such high energy that it's impossible for anyone not to feel it. This Tamarind Grove was allegedly planted 900 years ago by the Chola Kings. But that's not all. This grove has got a reputation of great healing properties. So follow me as we walk through the grove and examine a place where very few Indians either know about or even seen. As I walk through this grove, I'm reminded how tree lore has played a role in shaping ancient cultures. In myths and legends from around the world, trees appear as bridges between worlds, as sources of life and wisdom, and as the physical forms of supernatural beings. So we're going to examine what's so special about this grove. Why are these 900-year-old tamarind trees exhibiting such strange phenomena, which is never seen in any part of the world? We're going to visit the first tree here called the grandfather tree, and why it's called the grandfather tree, why the locals call it the grandfather tree. I hope you can see the bark or the branch of the tree that I'm sitting on. It's massive, it's very, very old, and it's about 900 years. And it emanates an energy that you can feel right into your bones. Now, I don't want the viewer just to be interested in a botany class and how these trees exhibit phenomena which is never seen in any part of the world. In fact, I think these trees which are exhibiting these strange botanical phenomena of its roots sprouting into new trees is perhaps a symptom of a great intelligence which is taking place in this grove. And I want you to walk with me to see some of these trees and the special phenomena and the energy it emanates. The local villagers tell me here that it is a great healing center, and I believe them, because I've been to other parts of the world, especially in parts of the United Kingdom, where I've seen very old yew trees. And when you come across those yew trees, you feel the same intelligence and the healing properties that you feel at this spot. This is the grandfather tree, because it's got a very old, male, wise energy. It's undeniable if you can feel it. It's like meeting your old grandfather, exactly like that. The ancient trees of Europe are well-known examples. In Asia and right here in India, the banyan and the peepal tree are associated with divine beings. The mythology of early India, preserved in texts called the Upanishads, includes a cosmic tree called Asvastha. In this extended part of this enchanted wood, isolated from the grandfather tree, you can see how these trees have weathered time. As we wander through, we encounter trees so ancient that they reflect a living embodiment of those very myths and legends woven into our cultures. So this is my favorite tree. I call her the grand dam of the grove because I believe this is the grandmother of this grove, just like we saw the grandfather earlier. She's the real protector of this grove. And the most unusual thing about this tree is she has sprouted from her roots many trees which spring forth from a distance, just like a runner or a grass runner would. I think it's a very important phenomenon to observe. But this tree is as old as the oldest tree in this grove, probably even older. And if you look very carefully, and if you're standing with me, you'll find the vibration of this tree of a very benign nature, something like a loving grandmother. That's why I call her the grandmother tree. Now people ask me, how do I know whether it's a masculine energy or a feminine energy? How do you know it's young or it's old? And I tell them, if you've met a child, you know that's a child. And if you cross paths with an old person, you know that person is old. You can feel it in your bones. No one can lie to you. And that's the energy that you feel as you come to this tree. Now, what I've heard from the local villagers is that this tree is a gift-giving tree. And once a year, they hold a festival for this special place. Childless couples come to this tree to have their prayers answered. But if you come here, you'll immediately feel a very benign feminine energy emanating from this particular tree. And these are the 3 or 4 trees which is very important in this entire grove. And once you come to this grove, this particular tree, you'll see offshoots of these trees sprouting out from its very roots. A very rare phenomenon indeed, and I don't see this in any part of the world. As I peel the bark of this grandmother tree, which feels just like aged skin, I'm reminded of that old but terrifying German law. For anyone who dared to peel the bark of a standing tree, the culprit's navel was to be cut out and nailed to the part of the tree which he had peeled. And he was to be driven round and round the tree till all his guts were wound about its trunk. The intention of the punishment clearly was to replicate the dead bark by a living substitute taken from the culprit. It was a life for a life, the life of a man for the life of a tree. Perhaps we should bring some of those laws back. So this is another massively old tree, and if you take a look at the bark, how it's completely gnarled, wrinkled, molted, if you will. Just like a granddad or a grandmother. Now, some say this is one of the oldest trees in this particular grove, but I've met a scientist who says it's of an indeterminate age. And just look at the bark, the way it's morphed. And what I don't understand is, how are these trees surviving? Should they survive at all? And why are they surviving in this way? Why are they changing shape? Why are they showing very interesting botanical morphology, never seen before? And yet they bear fruit, year after year. The energies that you feel from these trees are certainly enormous, and you need to stand with me alongside these trees to actually feel them. There are 3 or 4 trees like this in this grove which are quite important and very ancient. What can these trees teach us about aging? What can these trees teach us about patience? What can these trees teach us about prana and life? – 900-year-old trees, or even longer, have learned to preserve their prana and their life-giving qualities. And we need to learn to respect it and preserve these jewels of nature hidden from the rest of the world. Come and look at this trunk of this tree. This is not unique just to this tree. And if you notice this trunk, it's twisting like a rope. Most slightly on top it's leaning and it's twisting. And the reason I think all the trees are doing this is to actually defy gravity and prevent collapse. This twist of the trunk gives it additional strength. Take a look at these gnarled knots or the gnarled bark of this tree dripping off the main trunk. How old do you think they are? How old do you think gravity can keep this tree up where it stands today, or perhaps standing for 900 years? Well, I think this tree is trying to tell us something. This tree is life itself. A tree which has managed to survive and live, not just this tree, but this entire grove for 900 years, is life itself. How has it managed to preserve life, respect life, and shows us the way to patience and live in harmony with nature? These are definitely off the beaten track that the normal tourist will never see. This is not really a natural phenomenon, but this has been planted for a particular purpose by the Chola Kings, and has stood the rigors of time. This is a tree of life.
The continuing recurrence of the metaphor, namely the tree of life, in a variety of religions, define humankind's common heritage and culture. The tree of life portrays prominent allegories in religious writings all over. These are examples of how humankind has shaped their linkages to a universal consciousness through nature. For example, the Norse mythology, and for me a metaphor, describes how Yggdrasil, I hope I got that right, is the center to the cosmos and connects the 9 worlds of Norse cosmology. Legends speak of a world tree which is linked with the center of the earth, evoking images of ancient and majestic trees. The tree of life and the world tree is probably the most ancient human myth, and as an archetype, it is definitely a universal one. Out of nowhere, you encounter a mysterious structure in this grove. This grove was reputedly built by the Chola dynasty, which was the Tamil thalassocracy of southern India, one of the longest ruling dynasties in the world. It was culturally pluralistic and fantastically rich. Revenue administration, village self-government, and irrigation were highly organized under the Cholas. I could be wrong, but it strikes one as you approach or circumnavigate the structure that it does not resemble a temple, or perhaps never intended to be built as a temple. Trees of this grove were planted linearly and seem built for purpose. It gives one the impression that this grove was intended to be a garden or a cultural center. Look at the beautiful carved reliefs etched out of solid granite. These reliefs are of dancing damsels or maidens. Inside, the only remnant of this silent edifice is a headless apsara, a celestial nymph. No motifs of gods or goddesses can be seen. A telltale giveaway that this center was intended to be a musical or a cultural place. Rajendra Chola Deva I and his son's reign, around 1040 to 1100 AD, coincides with the planting of this grove. And as history records, the Chola dynasty ended in 1279. During this time that the memory of this grove faded too, but preserved somehow so future generations like you and me can appreciate the energy of this place.
So here we are at a very old tree, probably at the same age as the grandfather tree and the grandmother tree, but it looks smaller and shorter. And what I want to show you is a very unusual phenomena of a trunk morphing into another trunk. Is this survival? Or is it morphing into a completely different species? Now, some of these trees really defy age. And what I want to talk to you about as a viewer is life itself. If these trees are this old, can you imagine what they've seen or been witness to?
I don't accept that these trees have metastasized because they were struck by lightning or resuscitated into unusual shapes after a forest fire. Every tree in this grove exhibits this remarkable morphology, and there are at least 100 of them. Each tree seems to want to expand into a grove of its own by sprouting new trees from its roots. An act of rebirth or immortality that, to the best of my knowledge, has never been witnessed before or anywhere, at least in tamarind trees. While trees have always functioned as giant valves of the carbon cycle and shelter for humans, they have also helped us reinforce the connection we have to them as living, breathing organisms. Trees are revered in Indian culture for their many fine attributes such as medicinal benefits, providing food, giving shade, recharging groundwater, all these things being essential to the existence of human beings, animals, insects, birds and microorganisms that thrive on the benevolence of trees. It is now very matter of fact today to relate to ancient trees to their myth and legends. Recently, I heard about a Persian creation story, a tree that grew from the decaying body of the first human. The trunk of the tree split, creating man and woman. The story also describes how the fruit from the tree became the various races of humankind. These allegories of opposite forces, like male and female, resonate in almost every culture and are testament how trees have woven intricately into our lives from the ancient past. The variety of cultural values and symbolism ascribed to these trees are as numerous and diverse as the communities and cultures of Earth. Today, they feature in all aspects of our culture. What amazes me as we move amongst these trees is the sound of silence that emanates from this grove. The grove has been a silent witness to history, wars, earthquakes, other natural disasters, and predates both the Mughals and the British Raj. And as time passed, it silently recorded these world events in their branches, trunks, and roots. Perhaps this grove has witnessed stories and tales that were never written or recorded. If only these trees could speak.